The late-night diner reeked of burnt coffee and dreams that had fallen apart at 2 a.m. Claire Bennett dragged a damp rag across table 7, not knowing how many times she had done it tonight. Her back ached with a deep, stubborn pain. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a steady hum that had been drilling into her skull for hours. Her cheap shoes had soles so thin she could feel every crack in the tiled floor, each step answered by a tired squeak. $17 in tips over 5 hours. At this rate, she would come up short on rent again. Mrs. Park had warned her that her patience had limits. The doorbell rang. Claire did not look up right away. Late customers were usually truck drivers or insomniacs, people who wanted coffee and quiet in equal measure. But something made the air inside the diner change. A shift in pressure. Like the moment just before a storm breaks. When she finally glanced toward the door, her hand froze on the coffee pot. 4 men walked in, but only one of them mattered. He stood in the center, and everything about him screamed one word: danger. Wrapped in expensive cloth. A charcoal gray suit, tailored so precisely, it looked as if it had been stitched directly onto his body. Even from across the room, Claire could see its quality. The kind of clothing that cost more than she made in 6 months. Black hair swept back from a face that looked carved from marble. All sharp lines and restrained power. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow. The mark of a violent past. He did not scan the diner the way ordinary people did. His dark brown eyes swept the space with the exactness of someone locating exits, threats, and tactical advantage. The 3 men behind him were clearly bodyguards, built like walls in identical black suits, and the suspicious bulge beneath their jackets tightened Claire's stomach. The main man, the only one who mattered, moved toward the corner with a grace that was almost predatory. He walked as if violence was always an option, waiting just beneath that flawless exterior. Luca Moretti, the Mafia boss who controlled half the city, and Claire Bennett, a 27-year-old orphan grinding through the night shift, had no idea that in just a few hours she would face a decision that could save his life, or end her own. If you want to know what decision Claire made and how her fate changed, please press like to support this video. Share the story with friends who love emotional stories, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next parts. Claire drew a long, deep breath, forcing herself to steady. Her hand clenched the menu so tightly her knuckles blanched. Ray, the diner owner, watched her through the kitchen window with a warning look. A customer was a customer, no matter who they were. She made her exhausted legs carry her toward the corner booth, where Luca Moretti had already seated himself with the ease of a king settling onto his throne. The 3 bodyguards had spread out, 1 posted by the door, 2 stationed close to the windows, backs against the wall, eyes constantly sweeping the room. As Claire neared the table, she caught his scent. Bergamot, cigarette smoke, and leather. The blend was both seductive and frightening, as if even the fragrance were cautioning her about the danger it represented. She stopped beside the booth, trying to keep her voice calm, even as her heart hammered wildly in her chest. "Good evening. May I start you with something to drink?" Luca lifted his head, and the full weight of those dark brown eyes crashed into her like a physical blow. They looked almost entirely black under the diner's harsh fluorescent lights, framed by thick lashes that would have been beautiful on anyone less dangerous. There was intelligence in them, and something else too. A cold, calculating stillness that made her feel as if he could see straight through her cheap uniform and into every desperate secret she carried. Black coffee. His voice was low, smooth as aged whiskey, carrying the faint trace of an accent she could not quite place. Maybe Italian, and whatever passes for food in this place at this hour. Claire swallowed hard. "The stew is pretty good, sir." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and immediately she felt foolish. What would a man like this care about her opinion of diner stew in the middle of the night? But the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Stew, fine." Claire wrote down the order, acutely aware that his gaze had still not left her face. The 2 bodyguards by the windows were watching her as well, their scrutiny making her skin prickle. She turned to leave, aching to escape that suffocating attention. "Your name." His voice stopped her short. Claire glanced back over her shoulder. "Yes." He gestured toward her name tag with a graceful hand. "Claire. Is that your full name, or short for something?" Why was he asking? Why did he care? She hesitated for a beat before answering. "Claire. Just Claire." He nodded slowly, as if filing the information away somewhere inside his mind. "Thank you, Claire." The way he said her name sent an uneasy tremor through something deep in her belly. As if that name, that ordinary name she had carried for 27 years, suddenly became something else when it passed his lips. Something different, something intimate, something that belonged to him. She hurried back to the kitchen, her heart thudding against her ribs. "Who are they?" she whispered to Ray as she clipped the order onto the wheel. Ray glanced through the window, his face going pale. "Not good people. Feed them and get them out. Fast. Do not make conversation." But conversation was not the problem. The problem was the way her hands shook as she poured the coffee. The problem was the way she could feel his eyes tracking her each time she moved through the diner, a tangible weight that made the hair at the back of her neck stand up. The problem was that something about him, about the danger he represented, was calling to a part of her she did not want to admit existed. When she carried the coffee to the table, her hand came dangerously close to spilling it. He took it without comment, long fingers closing around the cup with the same controlled precision he seemed to apply to everything. And when she turned away, she felt his gaze burn into her back like a promise, or a threat. The doorbell rang again. Claire was pouring more coffee for a truck driver seated at the counter when the sound cut through the diner, and she noticed the shift in the air immediately, not the change in pressure that had come with Luca Moretti's entrance, but something else, sharper, more dangerous. Like the smell of smoke before a flame catches, two men stepped over the threshold. They were younger than Luca, maybe in their late 20s or early 30s, wearing expensive suits that were somehow less refined. The one in front had blonde hair and a handsome face in a cruel sort of way, with cold blue eyes and a jaw that looked engineered for contempt. The other was shorter, thicker, dark-skinned, with a restless energy that kept him in constant motion. They spotted Luca at once and headed straight for the corner booth, their body language aggressive in a way that put the bodyguards on edge. Claire watched from the corner of her eye as she set down the coffee pot. The guard by the door had already lifted a hand to his chest, right where the suspicious bulge lay beneath his jacket. But Luca simply sat there, perfectly calm, as if the two men closing in on him were nothing more than irritating flies. "We need to talk." The blonde one spoke loud enough for the whole diner to hear. He slid into the seat across from Luca without being invited, his companion following him in. Claire picked up her rag and began moving toward the tables near the corner, her motions slow and natural, as if she were only doing her usual work. But her ears strained, catching every word. "Tyler, Vincent." Luca's voice was ice cold. "I do not remember scheduling a meeting." "Yeah, well, we have a few concerns." The blonde man, Tyler, spoke with a thin layer of contempt in his tone. "About tonight's shipment. About the route you chose." Claire wiped down an empty table a few steps away, head lowered, her hair veiling part of her face. She tried to look invisible, just a tired waitress doing her job, but her heart was pounding like a drum. "The route is completely fine," Luca replied, his voice dangerous and gentle. "Unless you know something I do not. We are just saying it looks risky." Vincent cut in, his voice slightly unsteady. Going through the industrial district at 3 a.m. with that much product could be asking for trouble. Claire felt the air in the diner grow heavier. She glanced quickly over her shoulder and caught something that made her blood go cold. Tyler was looking toward the two bodyguards near the windows, and they were looking back. It was a signal, silent and unmistakable to anyone paying attention. And Claire was paying attention, because she had seen that look before. "I will consider your input." Luca's voice sliced through her thoughts. It was a dismissal, clear and final, but none of them moved. "Boss, we really think that." I said I will consider it. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "Now leave, both of you." Tyler and Vincent stood up, but not before Tyler glanced once more toward the bodyguards. The look lasted less than a second, but Claire saw it. She saw the confirmation in it, the complicity. When the two men walked out, the doorbell chiming behind them, Claire realized her hand was gripping the rag so hard her knuckles had gone white. She knew what she had just witnessed. A plot. A betrayal being arranged right in front of her. And the man sitting in the corner booth, the man whose scent still lingered in the air, had no idea that the people being paid to protect him were counting down the minutes to his death. Claire turned her back on the corner and walked toward the kitchen on shaking legs. She should not care. She should not get involved. This was not her world, not her war. But when she pushed the kitchen door open, her hand was still trembling, and in her mind, one question kept echoing, over and over. What was she going to do now? Claire stood in the kitchen, her back pressed to the cold wall, trying to control her quick, ragged breathing. That look, that glance between Tyler and the bodyguards. She had seen it as clearly as daylight, and she knew exactly what it meant. The memory hit like a wave of ice. 3 months ago, another diner on the other side of the city, where she had worked before transferring here. Another night shift. Another set of customers in expensive suits with cold eyes. She remembered that man, around 50, salt and pepper hair, laughing with 2 younger men, while his bodyguard kept watch near the door. She remembered the look between them, so quick it was almost invisible. But she had caught it, and she remembered 2 days later, when the news reported a well-known businessman shot dead in what the police called a targeted assassination. The men she had seen in the diner that night were suspects. They were released for lack of evidence. And Claire had said nothing. Not to the police, not to anyone, because she was only a waitress. Because it was not her business. Because she had chosen to protect herself, instead of stepping into a world that did not belong to her. But now, standing in a kitchen heavy with the smell of grease and leftover food, she could not stop thinking about Luca Moretti's dark brown eyes, about the way he looked at her, about the way he said her name as if it were something worth remembering. "Walk away," the rational voice in her head shouted. "This is not your problem. You know nothing about him except that he is dangerous. He is Mafia, a criminal, a man who may have killed dozens of people. Why would you care if he dies?" But another voice, smaller yet more persistent, whispered the opposite. "You know he is going to die. You know, and you can stop it. How will you live with yourself if you let him walk into that trap without saying a word?" Claire closed her eyes, and her mother's face rose in the dark. A thin woman with brown hair like Claire's, eyes always tired, yet full of love. Her mother had died when Claire was 11, a heroin overdose in the miserable apartment they called home. But before the drugs fully took her, before she became a shadow of herself, she had told Claire something Claire never forgot. "Claire, my love," her mother's voice echoed in memory, warm and sorrowful at the same time. "You have a heart too big for this cruel world. One day it will hurt you." Her mother had been right. That heart had hurt her many times. When she opened the door to strangers in foster homes and got back coldness or violence. When she trusted people who did not deserve it and was betrayed again and again. When she gave away what little she had and received nothing in return but emptiness. But that heart was also the only thing that kept her human after everything she had lived through. She opened her eyes and drew a deep breath. Through the kitchen window, she could see Luca Moretti still seated in the corner booth, sipping his black coffee with the easy calm of a man who believed he controlled the world around him. But he did not control anything at all. He did not know the people being paid to protect him had turned their backs. He did not know that at 3 a.m. tonight, in the industrial district, death was waiting for him. And only Claire knew. Only her, the invisible girl no one bothered to notice, held the information that could save his life. Or she could walk away, pretend she had seen nothing, and let fate decide. Her hands tightened around the edge of the sink, her chest full of conflict. Reason or heart, self-protection or taking the risk, survival or doing the right thing. And in that moment, her mother's voice came again, gentle as breath. "You have a heart too big." Claire knew what she was going to do. She had always known. Claire took a napkin from the stack of clean linens on the counter and pulled an old ballpoint pen from her apron pocket. Her hands trembled, but not from fear anymore. From determination, she bent over, shielding the napkin with her body, and began to write. Her handwriting shook, but it was legible. Each stroke of black ink pressed into the white paper like a sentence. "Your men are setting you up tonight. 3 a.m, the industrial district. Do not trust anyone here." She folded the napkin into a tiny square that fit neatly in her palm, then slipped it into her apron pocket. Her heart pounded wildly, blood roaring through her veins as if she had just run a marathon. Ray called from the kitchen window that the stew was ready. Claire lifted the plate with hands that had stopped shaking, steadied now by purpose instead of fear. She stepped out of the kitchen, her cheap shoes still squeaking on the tiled floor, but she no longer felt the exhaustion. Every sense was narrowed to a single point. The corner booth where Luca Moretti sat. As she drew closer, she could feel the bodyguard's eyes tracking her, the traitors, the men counting down the seconds to their boss's death. She forced her face into calm, just a tired waitress serving a customer, like she had hundreds of times before. Nothing special, nothing suspicious. "Here is your stew, sir." She set the plate down in front of Luca, her voice astonishingly steady. He looked up at her, and once again the full weight of those dark brown eyes came down on her. But this time, she did not flinch. This time, she had something to do. "Thank you, Claire." His voice was still low and smooth as ever, but something in the way he watched her made her think he had noticed the change in her, the new tension, the determination burning beneath her outward calm. Claire turned as if to walk away, but instead she let her hand drift across the tabletop. The movement looked natural, accidental, as if she were only steadying herself. But in that instant, her fingers brushed his hand. His skin was scorching, hot as if fire lived beneath it, as if the blood in his veins ran at a higher temperature than anyone else's. The contact lasted less than a second, but to Claire it stretched into a century. And in that second, she slipped the folded napkin into his palm. His fingers closed by reflex, catching the paper, and his eyes sharpened. Not the lazy gaze of a man sipping coffee in a late-night diner. The stare of a predator that had just sensed something wrong. Those dark brown eyes locked onto hers, and Claire felt as if he could read every thought, every fear, every reason behind what she had done. The intensity in his gaze was so fierce she felt like the only person left in the world. But she did not stop. She did not explain. She only turned her back and walked away, forcing herself toward the kitchen even as every instinct screamed at her to run. She did not look back. She could not, because if she looked back, she would see him unfold the napkin. She would see his reaction, and she did not know if she had the courage to face the consequences of what she had just done. Her heart hammered like a fist inside her chest as she pushed the kitchen door open. Somehow her legs still carried her to safety, even though she felt as if they might collapse at any moment. What had she just done? She had stepped into the Mafia's world, into a war she did not understand. She had gambled her life on a stranger she knew was dangerous. Had she saved him? Or had she just signed her own death notice? Claire leaned back against the kitchen wall, trying to get control of her chaotic breathing. Through the small window between the kitchen and the diner, she could see the corner table where Luca Moretti sat. She watched, unable to look away, like someone witnessing a car wreck unfold right in front of her. Luca held the tiny folded napkin in his palm, his thumb gliding lightly over the paper as if weighing it. Then he opened it, slowly, carefully, as if he already knew something important waited inside. Claire held her breath as he read her trembling lines. His face showed nothing at all. No surprise, no anger, no fear, completely blank, like a stone statue. But his body told a different story. His shoulders tightened beneath the expensive suit. His jaw clamped down, muscle hardening under skin. His fingers closed around the napkin so tightly the paper crumpled in his hand. It was the posture of a leopard preparing to strike. Strength coiled, waiting, dangerous. He folded the napkin again with meticulous care and slipped it into his suit pocket. The gesture was so ordinary no one could have suspected a thing. Then he rose with the smooth control of a man practiced at hiding emotion, pulled a thick wad of cash from his wallet, and set it on the table without counting. The stew still sat untouched on the plate. The coffee had gone cold in the cheap ceramic cup. He did not care. Maybe he had never intended to eat anything here in the first place. The three bodyguards straightened by instinct when their boss stood, but Claire noticed what they did not. Luca did not look at them the way he had before. Something had shifted in the way he moved, in the way he avoided turning his back to them, in the way his fingers brushed the edge of his suit coat, where she knew something had to be hidden beneath. He knew now. He knew they were the enemy, and they had no idea the curtain had been pulled back. Luca walked toward the door, his stride still effortless and confident, just as it had been when he entered. But just before he reached it, he stopped. His head turned toward the kitchen. Those dark brown eyes swept the room and found her through the small window. Claire stood there like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move, unable to breathe. His gaze locked onto hers, and in that moment, she saw everything. The surprise, the curiosity, the calculation, and something else, deeper, more intense, something she did not have a name for. He did not nod. He did not smile. He did not make any gesture at all to acknowledge what she had done. But that look said everything. I received it. I will not forget. Then he turned away and walked out. The bell rang as the door opened, then closed, and the diner suddenly felt strangely hollow, as if Luca Moretti had taken the air with him when he left. Claire sank down, her back sliding along the wall until she sat on the icy kitchen floor. Her legs no longer had the strength to hold her up. Her hands shook violently, as if she had just stepped out of a blizzard. The adrenaline drained from her body, leaving behind only complete exhaustion and a wide emptiness in her chest. What had she done? She had saved the life of a Mafia boss, or she had just signed her own death notice. Because men like Luca Moretti did not forget. They did not let things go. And she had put herself on his radar, stepping willingly into a world she did not belong to. Ray grumbled something from the counter about the customer being gone and why she had not cleared the table. Claire did not hear him. She only sat there, staring into nothing, trying to understand what had just happened. And in her mind, those dark brown eyes still burned like two flames, like a promise, or a threat. Claire pushed her apartment door open and was slapped in the face by cold. The heater had broken last week, and Mrs. Park still had not sent anyone to fix it, even though Claire had called 3 times. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and stood there for a moment in the dark, letting the silence wrap around her. The apartment was tiny, barely enough space for a narrow twin bed, a miniature kitchenette, and a corner that could be called a bathroom. The ceiling bore an old water stain, yellowed with time. Paint peeled at the edges of the room. The window was shut tight, but wind still slipped in through unseen cracks. This was her home, the place she paid $400 a month for the right to call herself sheltered. Claire kicked off her worn-out shoes and traded her work clothes for an old sweater and the thickest sleep pants she owned. Then she climbed into bed, pulled the blanket up over her head, and curled in on herself like a stray cat trying to hold on to warmth. Her breath made a thin mist in the icy air. She should sleep. Tonight's shift had wrung her dry, and tomorrow she had to get up early to apply for a job at the grocery store down the street. But every time she closed her eyes, those dark brown eyes rose in the darkness. Luca Moretti's eyes. The way he had looked at her through the kitchen window before walking out. The intensity, the focus. Something fierce she could not name. No one had ever looked at her like that. As if she mattered. As if she was worth seeing. Claire turned over, pulling the blanket tighter around her. She should not think about him. He was Mafia. A criminal. The kind of danger she was supposed to stay far away from. She had done what she needed to do. Warned him about the betrayal, and that was it. He would forget her. Men like him had an entire world to manage. An empire to rule, enemies to face. A broke waitress was not worth a second of their attention. She was only invisible. She had always been invisible. Memory rolled in like a tidal wave and dragged her under. She remembered the miserable apartment where she grew up. The smell of cigarettes and alcohol woven together with the scent of poverty. She remembered her mother, that thin woman with sad eyes, who loved her with her whole heart but was not strong enough to defeat her own demons. She remembered the morning when she was 11. Coming home from school and finding her mother motionless on the floor, the needle still lodged in her arm. After that came 7 foster homes in 7 years. 7 houses she was never allowed to call home. Some families were indifferent, treating her like an unwanted piece of furniture. Others were worse, places where she had to learn to lock her bedroom door at night. Then 18, when the system spit her out like trash, and she stepped into the world with $200 in her pocket and a backpack holding everything she owned. The first winter was the hardest. 3 months on the street, sleeping in subway stations, lining up at churches for free meals. She remembered the cold that sliced through skin and bone, the hollow gnawing hunger in her stomach, the looks from strangers who saw her and quickly looked away, as if poverty were contagious. But she survived. She found her first job, then a second, then a third. She saved every dollar she could so she could rent this apartment, even if it was tiny and freezing. She had pulled herself up alone, without anyone's help, without leaning on anyone, and she was proud of that. Claire drew a deep breath, her exhale trembling in the cold air. He will forget me. By tomorrow morning, I will be nothing but a faded memory, an unnamed waitress in a shabby late-night diner. Life will keep moving the way it always does. She would keep working, keep paying rent, keep surviving, alone, the way she always had. She closed her eyes again, trying to force herself into sleep. But those dark brown eyes still haunted her in the darkness, like a promise she did not dare believe. Claire slipped into a restless sleep near dawn, and woke when the weak November sun filtered through the thin curtain. Her body ached, as if a truck had rolled over her. She lay there for a while, staring up at the familiar water stains on the ceiling, trying to convince herself that everything from last night had been nothing but a strange dream. But it was not a dream. She knew that. She could still feel the heat of Luca Moretti's skin when their hands touched. She could still see those dark brown eyes burning into her through the kitchen window. Claire forced herself out of bed, went to the tiny bathroom, and splashed cold water on her face. She looked into the cracked mirror and saw the shadows under her eyes, the pallor of sleeplessness. Today she had to apply for a job at the grocery store. Today life had to continue as normal. He will forget me. Men like him do not remember girls like me. The knock came at noon. Hard. Decisive. Not the kind of knock Mrs. Park used, or anyone Claire knew. Her heart skipped. No one knocked on her apartment door. No one knew she lived here except the landlord, and Mrs. Park always called first. Claire moved toward the door on trembling legs, her palms slick with sweat. She looked through the peephole, and her blood turned to ice. A man in a black suit stood in the hallway, not one of the traders she had seen last night. This one was older, maybe 40, with an angular face and a cool, professional gaze. He looked straight at the peephole, as if he knew she was watching. Claire Bennett. His voice carried through the door, polite but leaving no choice. I need a little of your time. Every survival instinct in her screamed at her to stay silent, to pretend she was not home. But he knew her full name. He knew she lived here. Pretending she did not exist would not save her. With shaking hands, Claire opened the door, but kept the safety chain latched. "What do you want?" Her voice was hoarse with strain. The man did not seem annoyed by her caution. "My employer wants to speak with you." He raised an expensive phone, the screen glowing. "He asked me to facilitate this conversation. You can speak with him on the phone, or I can arrange to bring you to meet him in person. Your choice." The third option, refusing, hung in the air between them like an unspoken threat. Claire swallowed and reached through the narrow gap, taking the phone. Cold metal pressed against her skin as she lifted it to her ear. "Hello?" Her voice was so small she could barely hear herself. Claire, that voice, low, smooth as aged whiskey, with the faint Italian edge she had recognized last night. It sent a shiver down her spine. "I trust Marco did not frighten you too much." "I am fine," Claire lied, her voice trembling slightly. "Good." A short pause, as if he were choosing his words. "I want to thank you for the warning last night. In person. Dinner, 7 o'clock tonight." It was not a question. It was a statement. "I cannot." Claire tried to refuse, even though her voice sounded pathetically weak. "I have a shift. I can arrange for someone else to cover your shift." Of course he could. Men like him could arrange anything. The thought should have terrified her. But instead it made something in her chest tremble in a way she did not want to admit. "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Why do you care? I am only a waitress." Silence stretched for a moment. When Luca spoke again, his voice had softened in a way that was almost imperceptible. "You are not no one, Claire. And I always repay my debts. Marco will pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." The line went dead before she could say anything else. Claire stood there, still holding the phone, staring into nothing. Her life had just turned in a completely different direction, and she did not know whether she should be afraid or thrilled. Maybe both. Claire stood in front of her closet, hanging wide open, and faced a painful truth. She had nothing to wear. Her wardrobe was a collection of things scavenged from thrift stores and clearance racks. Faded jeans, t-shirts with frayed collars. The diner uniform she had to wash every night because she only owned one. The closest thing she had to something formal was a black dress she bought 2 years ago for a job interview at an office. She had not been hired because she had no college degree and no experience, but the dress was still there. Claire took it out and brushed a thin layer of dust from the shoulders. It was simple, modest, with a discreet V neckline and a hem that fell to her knees. Nothing special, but it was all she had. She took a quick shower under cold water, because the water heater had been broken for a long time too, just like the furnace. Then she put on the dress, letting her hair fall naturally because she had no hairdryer and no styling tools. Minimal makeup with what little she owned. A touch of mascara to make her gray-blue eyes look less tired. A swipe of balm because her lips were cracked year-round. When she looked into the cracked bathroom mirror, the contrast was painful. She was a poor girl trying to look like a normal person, but a thrift store dress could not hide hands made rough by hard work. A thin layer of makeup could not hide the shadows under her eyes from too little sleep. And the only shoes she had were worn black flats, the same pair she wore to work every day. She was going to step into Luca Moretti's world looking like this. Like someone who did not belong there. Like she had always been. At exactly 7 in the evening, the familiar knock came. Marco stood there, still in his flawless black suit, his face unreadable. If he had any thoughts about Claire's appearance, he did not show them. She followed him down the shabby stairs, through a hallway that smelled of damp and mildew, and out into the night. A black SUV waited at the curb like a creature from another world. It gleamed under the streetlights, huge and expensive enough that Claire felt afraid to touch the door handle. Marco opened the back door for her, and she climbed inside. The interior stole her breath. The leather seats were softer than anything she had ever touched. So smooth and rich she was afraid simply sitting down would stain them with her poverty. The tinted windows shut out the world beyond. The air inside was warm and carried the scent of new leather. She sat with her hands in her lap, afraid to move, like a child who had wandered into a palace by mistake. The SUV glided through the city in silence. Claire stared through the glass at bright high-rises, luxury storefronts spilling golden light, men in suits and women with designer bags walking the sidewalks. This was a world she had only ever seen from far away, through the windows of late-night buses when she rode home from work. When the vehicle stopped in front of an elegant building, Marco led her inside through a private entrance, away from the main lobby. They walked down a long corridor lit by warm lamps, then up a staircase to a private room on the top floor. The VIP suite looked out over the entire city through a massive wall of glass. A crystal chandelier cast a gentle glow. The table was set with pristine white china and sparkling crystal stemware. And there, standing by the window with his back to her, was Luca Moretti. He had removed his jacket, wearing only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing tanned, muscular forearms. Scars crisscrossed the skin, proof of a violent past she could only imagine. When he turned, those dark brown eyes met hers, and Claire forgot how to breathe. Claire. Luca said her name as if it were something precious, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. Thank you for coming. He moved toward her with the fluid grace of a predator, but there was something different in his eyes tonight. Not the cold, calculating chill she had seen in the diner. Curiosity, real interest. He stopped a few steps away, close enough for her to catch that familiar scent of bergamot and leather, but far enough not to invade her space. Please, sit. He pulled out her chair, a gesture of courtesy she had not expected from a Mafia boss. Claire sat, feeling the soft chair cradle her exhausted body. A server appeared as if from nowhere, poured red wine into her glass, then vanished without a sound. Luca took the seat across from her, his dark brown eyes never leaving her face. Silence held for a few seconds before he spoke. Why did you save me? The question went straight to the point, no circling. Claire had known it would come, yet she still was not ready with an answer. She looked down at the wine glass, watching the light shimmer on the surface of the deep red liquid, searching for the right words. I know what it is like to be betrayed by the people who are supposed to protect you. When she finally spoke, her voice came out softer than she intended. I have seen that look before. The way they traded glances, the way they were counting down time. I could not just stand there and let it happen. Luca was silent for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her want to turn away. But she did not. She held his gaze, because she had not been afraid when she slid him that note, and she would not be afraid now. Most people would look the other way, he said slowly. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct, but you chose to risk yourself for a stranger. That is rare. Claire did not know how to answer, so she stayed quiet. The appetizer arrived, plates arranged like art she did not know the names of. She had served food for years, but she had never seen anything like this. Tiny portions of meat on oversized plates, decorated with things she did not even recognize as edible. She lifted her utensils awkwardly, unsure which fork or knife to use among the 5 sets laid around her plate. Luca watched her with a faint smile, not mocking, but something almost tender. Tell me about you, Claire, he said as they began to eat. There is nothing to tell, she replied with a shrug. I am just a waitress. Everyone has a story. He tilted his head, sharp eyes missing nothing. Where did you grow up? Do you have family? Claire hesitated. She was not used to sharing herself, not used to letting anyone see the wounds she kept hidden, but something in the way Luca asked, in the patient silence as he waited, made her want to speak. I do not have family, she began, her voice light as breath. My mother died when I was 11. My father left before I was born. After that, foster homes. 7 families in 7 years. She paused and took a sip of wine. It was better than anything she had ever tasted, but she barely noticed the flavor. When I was 18, I aged out of the system. I lived on the streets for a while. Then I found work, and now I am here. She looked up and found Luca listening, truly listening, not the polite nod people give when they are waiting for their turn to speak, but full attention, as if every word she said mattered to him. No one had ever looked at her like that. No one had ever cared enough about her story to hear it all the way through. She was used to being invisible, used to being overlooked, used to existing without truly being seen. But now, under Luca Moretti's gaze, she felt something she had forgotten long ago. The feeling of being seen, being acknowledged, being considered important. The main course arrived, a plate of beef prepared in a way Claire had never seen, but she barely registered it. The conversation had drifted into lighter territory, about the city, about places Luca had been, about the books Claire read when she had free time at the public library. He asked, and she answered, and somehow she realized she was more at ease than she ever thought she could be. But then, when the server cleared the plates and poured more wine, Luca set his utensils down and looked at her with a more serious gaze. Claire, his voice was still low and smooth, but something heavier moved beneath it. There is something I think you should know about what happened after that night. Her heart tightened. She had known this was coming. She had tried not to think about it, but now it was here, hanging between them like a ghost. Those men, Luca said, his tone calm, as if he were discussing the weather. Tyler, Vincent, and the 2 bodyguards who turned on me. They are dead. The world around Claire seemed to freeze. The wine glass in her hand stopped mid-air, neither reaching her lips nor returning to the table. She heard every word, but her mind refused to process them. Dead. They are dead. 4 men. 4 lives. He continued, those dark brown eyes never leaving her face. I handled the situation thoroughly. The traitors, the men who set up the ambush, all of them have been dealt with. There was no emotion in his voice. No regret. No anger. Only a simple statement of fact. As if the deaths of 4 men were just another item on a list of tasks to complete. Betrayal in my world has only one price, he added. And there was something in his gaze. A challenge. An unspoken question. Can you accept this? Can you look at the monster in front of you and not run? Claire set her glass down on the table, her hand trembling slightly. She knew she should be afraid. She knew she should be sickened. A man had just confessed to killing 4 people in front of her, and he spoke of it without hesitation. But another thought, darker, rose from deep inside her. She had caused those men to die. Her note, her warning. If she had done nothing, if she had simply walked away and pretended she saw nothing, they would still be alive. Maybe Luca would have died instead. But Tyler, Vincent, and those 2 bodyguards would still be breathing, still walking the streets, still living their lives. And now they were somewhere cold and still because she had chosen to intervene. Claire waited for the wave of remorse to crash down. She waited for guilt to clamp around her chest. She waited to feel horror at what she had indirectly set in motion. But it did not come. Instead, she felt a strange emptiness. And deep in that emptiness, in the darkest place of her soul she had never admitted to anyone, a voice whispered the thing she was afraid to hear. She did not regret it. They were traitors. They had planned to kill a man who trusted them, and they had received the consequences they deserved. Claire lifted her head and met Luca's gaze, felt him watching her with fierce curiosity. He was waiting for her reaction, studying every movement in her face, every blink, every breath. He wanted to know who she truly was, whether she was a naive girl who would cry and flee when confronted with the darkness of his world, or whether she was something else. I understand, she said at last, her voice surprisingly steady. They chose to betray you, and you did what you had to do. A flash sparked in Luca's dark eyes, something like respect, or maybe astonishment. He had expected fear, expected disgust, expected her to demand to leave immediately, but she did not, and she realized, in that moment, that it had changed the way he looked at her. After dinner, Luca stood and held out his hand to her. There is somewhere I want to show you. Claire hesitated for a second before placing her hand in his. His skin was still hot the way she remembered, and the sensation sent a shiver up her arm. He led her out of the restaurant, into a private elevator with gold buttons, and they rose in silence. When the doors opened, Claire stepped into an entirely different world. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the building, and a massive wall of glass revealed the whole city below. Millions of lights glittered in the night like stars dropped onto the earth, forming a carpet of brightness that stretched all the way to the horizon. Claire moved closer to the glass, her breath catching in her chest. She had never seen the city from this angle. Down on the street, where she belonged, the city was only towering buildings that blocked out the sky, dark streets, and the harsh wail of horns. But from here, from this height, it looked like a dream. Beautiful in a way that hurt. Luca stood beside her, his gaze also fixed on the view outside. When I first came to this country, he began, his voice low and distant, I was 16 years old. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a few dollars in my pocket. I came from a small village in Sicily, where poverty was the only thing we had in abundance. Claire turned to look at him and saw something shift in his expression. The cold mask had cracked, revealing the man underneath, the boy he had once been, poor the way she had once been an orphaned child. I did everything to survive, he continued, with no shame and no apology in his tone. Things ordinary people would never do. And in 20 years, I built everything you see here. This empire, this power, with blood, with violence, with decisions most people would call ruthless. He turned to her, those dark brown eyes deep and honest. I am not a good man, Claire. I have never been a good man, and I will probably never be a good man. I want you to understand that before we go any further, Claire did not know what to say. She stood there in the lavish penthouse with the city lights glittering below, facing a man who had just confessed his true nature. And instead of fear, she felt a strange connection, because she also knew what it meant to do anything to survive. She also knew what it meant to be backed into a corner and forced to fight for your life. Stay tonight, Luca said, and it was not an order, it was an offer. gentler than anything she would have expected from him. "There is a private room for you. No pressure. No expectations. Just one night where you do not have to worry about anything." Claire thought of the apartment waiting for her, freezing because the heater was broken, empty because no one waited there. Mrs. Park would knock this weekend to demand rent she did not have, and tomorrow she would drag her exhausted feet back to the diner, working herself raw for $17 in tips. She was tired, bone tired, not just from work, but from 27 years of fighting alone, 27 years with no one on her side, 27 years of trying to keep her head above water while the world kept trying to push her under. And now a man was offering her a night of rest. Just one night. One night. Claire heard her own voice, weak and trembling. Just that. Luca's smile was not the triumphant smile of a victor. It was something gentler, warmer, something that made her heart ache in a way she did not want to admit. "Just that," he agreed, and they both knew it was a lie. Luca led Claire to a room at the end of the hallway, pushed the door open, and stepped aside to let her enter. Claire crossed the threshold and stopped, unable to believe what she was seeing. The room was larger than her entire apartment. A king-size bed sat in the center, covered in pristine white sheets that looked soft as clouds. A wide glass window opened onto the city at night, and on the bed, folded neatly, lay a cream-colored silk set of pajamas. "Everything you need is in the bathroom," Luca said from behind her. "If you need anything else, I will be at the end of the hall." The door closed softly, and Claire stood alone in luxury she had never imagined. She walked into the bathroom and had to stop again. A marble bathtub, a shower with more spray heads than she could count, thick towels hanging on a heated rack, and when she turned the water on, hot water poured out immediately. No waiting, no weakening stream that turned cold the way it did in her apartment. Claire stepped into the shower and let the hot water run over her exhausted body. It was the first time in years she had taken a real hot shower, not the weak, lukewarm trickle from a broken fixture, not rushing to finish before the water turned cold, but steady heat, wrapping around her like an embrace. And that was when she cried, not from sadness, not from fear, but because she was standing in the shower of a luxurious penthouse, hot water streaming down her hair and shoulders, and for the first time in her life, she felt warm, truly warm, not only physically, but somewhere deeper, in the place inside her that had been frozen for a long time. She cried for the 11-year-old girl who had found her mother motionless on the floor. She cried for the 18-year-old girl curled up in the corner of a subway station in winter. She cried for 27 years of loneliness, fighting, and surviving with no one on her side. When the tears ran out, she shut off the water, dried herself with the softest towel she had ever touched, and slipped into the silk pajamas. They fit perfectly, as if they had been measured and made just for her. She climbed into bed, and the mattress cradled her like a cloud. The sheets were cool and smooth against her skin. For the first time in years, she was truly comfortable, but she could not sleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Finally, around 2 a.m, she gave up trying to sleep and stepped out of the room. The penthouse was dark, lit only by the city glow seeping through the glass and painting soft patches of light across the floor. Claire walked toward the living room and stopped when she saw a figure by the window. Luca stood there with a glass of whiskey in his hand, his back to her, looking out at the sleeping city. "Cannot sleep?" he asked without turning, as if he already knew she was there. Claire moved closer. "You too? Old habit. In my line of work, sleeping too deeply can get you killed." He turned to look at her, and in the dim light his face seemed softer, less dangerous. "I trained myself to wake at the smallest sound, always alert. It kept me alive, but it is lonely. Lonely." Claire understood the word more than almost anyone. "Do you ever wish you could stop?" she asked quietly. "Leave it all behind and live like a normal person?" Luca was silent for a long time. "Sometimes. On late nights like this, when I stand alone and wonder what any of what I built means if there is no one to share it with." He looked at her, and something slipped free in his eyes, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "But then morning comes, and I remember this is who I am. This is my life, and I cannot escape it." Claire nodded, understanding more than he could know. "I know that feeling," she whispered, "wanting someone to see you, really see you, but being afraid of what will happen if they do." They stood there in silence, two lonely souls in the late-night dark, and for the first time, Claire felt she was not alone anymore. The city lights reflected in Luca's dark brown eyes when he turned to look at her, and Claire felt something shift in the air between them. The tension had been there since the moment she stepped into that late-night diner, but now it was different. No longer the tension of danger and fear, It was something deeper, more intense, something that made her heart race and her breathing turn shallow. Stay. Luca's voice was low and rough in the late-night hush. Not just tonight. Stay with me. Claire felt as if someone had pulled all the air from her lungs. She looked at him, searching for a hint of teasing or some hidden purpose. But she saw only sincerity and longing, a longing so fierce it was almost tangible, burning in his dark eyes like twin flames. I cannot, she whispered it. But her voice carried no conviction. You do not know anything about me. I am just a broke waitress. I do not belong in this world. I know enough. Luca stepped closer, and she could feel the heat that radiated from him, the familiar scent of bergamot and leather wrapping around her like an invitation. I know you are brave. I know you are kind. I know you risked your life for a stranger and asked for nothing in return. And I know that when you look into my eyes, you do not see the monster everyone else sees. You see me. Claire wanted to argue. She wanted to say she could not stay, that she had her own life, that getting tangled up with a mafia boss was the most reckless thing she could ever do. But the words died on her lips when she looked into his eyes and saw reflected there the very things she had spent her whole life searching for. Acceptance. Belonging. A place to call home. She had been running for 27 years. Running from the pain of losing her mother. Running from foster families that did not want her. Running from freezing streets and gnawing hunger. Running from anyone who tried to get close, because she was terrified of being abandoned again. And now she was standing here, in a lavish penthouse, with the city lights glittering below, and a man was offering her something she had never had, a place to stop, arms to lean into, a reason to stop running. She was too tired to keep running. Luca lifted his hand, slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted, but she did not step back. She stayed still as his fingers touched her cheek, light as a feather, as if he feared she might shatter under the contact. His skin was warm, his thumb traced her cheekbone, and she realized she was trembling, not from cold, not from fear, from something else entirely. He lowered his head, slowly, giving her every chance to refuse. But instead of retreating, Claire found herself leaning forward, the space between them narrowing until his mouth met hers. The kiss was gentle, slow, so soft it almost did not feel real. His lips were warm and tender, and she tasted a faint trace of whiskey there. He kissed her as if she were something precious, something to be handled with care, something that could break if he was not careful. And Claire kissed him back. She lifted her hands, gripping the front of his shirt, drawing him closer. The kiss deepened, turned more intense, and the world around them disappeared. No more lavish penthouse, no more city lights, no more painful past or uncertain future. Only the two of them, two lonely souls who had finally found each other in the middle of the night. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Luca's forehead rested against hers, his eyes still closed, as if he were afraid that if he opened them, this moment would vanish. I will protect you, he whispered it, his voice raw. Always. And for the first time in her life, Claire believed someone's promise. 3 weeks passed like a dream. Claire was afraid she would wake from it any moment. She moved into the penthouse, carrying a small handbag that held everything she owned, and realized her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. Luca arranged everything. He paid the rent on her old apartment for an entire year so Mrs. Park would not cause trouble. He called Ray and told him Claire would not be coming back to work, and Claire did not want to know how that conversation went. He had her clothes brought over. Even though most of them were so old and worn, she felt ashamed seeing them laid beside the new things he had bought for her. Claire's new life was nothing like anything she had ever known. In the mornings, she woke in a soft bed with smooth sheets, and someone brought breakfast straight to her. She did not have to worry about where her next meal would come from anymore. She did not have to count coins to see if she had enough to buy bread. The refrigerator was always full. The closet always held something new. The apartment stayed warm even when snow fell outside. For the first time in her life, Claire was not hungry, not cold, not exhausted, and she did not know what to do with that feeling. But life with Luca Moretti came with rules. You are not to go anywhere alone, he said on the second day, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marco or one of my men will always be with you. This is not control, Claire. This is protection. My world is dangerous, and now everyone knows you matter to me. That makes you a target. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to say she had survived 27 years without anyone protecting her, but then she remembered Tyler and Vincent's cold eyes, remembered the bodyguards who had been ready to betray their boss, and she understood Luca was not exaggerating. His world truly was dangerous, and now she had stepped into it. So every time she left the penthouse, Marco followed. He was silent and professional, never intruding on her private life, but always there like a protective shadow. At first, Claire hated it, as if she were trapped in a gilded cage, but slowly she learned to accept it, learned to see the care behind the strict rules. Luca was possessive. There was no denying it. He wanted to know where she was, what she was doing, who she was with. He was jealous of anyone who looked at her too long, of any man who dared to come close, but he also respected her boundaries. He gave her a private room and never forced her into anything. He asked her opinion before making decisions that affected her life. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, as if her thoughts mattered. They learned how to belong to each other, one day at a time. Claire learned to read Luca's moods through the smallest changes in his expression, in the way his shoulders tightened when he was under pressure, in the way his jaw clenched when he was angry. Luca learned to give Claire space when she needed it, learned to comfort her when nightmares from the past came for her at night. They ate dinner together every evening, no matter how busy Luca was. They talked about everything and nothing, about the books Claire read, about the deals Luca was chasing, about the dreams they had both abandoned long ago. And little by little, the cold penthouse began to feel like home, not because of the luxury, but because someone was waiting for her every time she came back. That afternoon, Luca had an important meeting he could not delay. He kissed Claire's forehead before he left, promised he would be back before dinner, and left Marco behind to guard the penthouse. Claire was sitting by the window reading when she heard the elevator, and she looked up with a smile, thinking Luca had come home early. But the person who stepped out was not Luca. It was a woman, beautiful in a breathtaking way Claire knew she could never match. Long black hair, glossy and heavy, fell over her shoulders like a waterfall. Sharp brown eyes were lined and painted to perfection. The red dress she wore clung to her body, showing curves that only money and time could create. Everything about her was expensive, from the designer handbag to the heels that surely cost more than an entire month of Claire's old wages. Marco moved to block her, but the woman exploited a legacy security override code from her time as his fiancé, forcing the elevator to respond to her command before the junior guards could react. She stepped out with a cold smile, flicking a hand at Marco as if shooing away a fly. "Move, Marco. I only want to speak to Luca's new pet." Claire stood up so fast her book slipped from her hands. "Pet." The woman stepped closer, her gaze traveling up and down Claire's body with undisguised contempt. "So you are the one replacing me. Interesting. I thought Luca had better taste." "Who are you?" Claire asked, her voice harder than she intended. "Vanessa Romano." The woman smiled, but the smile did not reach her cold eyes. "Luca's fiancé. Or rather, his former fiancé. We were engaged 5 years ago, before he decided I was no longer suitable." Claire's heart tightened. Fiancé. Luca had never mentioned this. He had never talked about any woman from his past. And now this sculpted, impossibly beautiful woman stood in front of her, claiming she was the one Luca had once intended to marry. Vanessa moved closer, her expensive perfume flooding the space. "You think you are special, do you not? You think he loves you, that you are different from the others." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "I used to think that too. We all do. But then he gets bored. He always gets bored. And when that happens, you will be thrown away like trash, just like me." Claire tried to keep her face calm, but Vanessa's words stabbed at her heart like needles. She glanced down at what she was wearing, the silk loungewear Luca had bought her, and suddenly she felt like an imposter. A broke waitress playing dress-up in a world that did not belong to her. "He will get bored of you," Vanessa went on, her voice pure venom. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually he will realize you are nothing but a pretty face and a sad little story. And then you will learn what it feels like to be discarded by a man like Luca Moretti." "Vanessa." Luca's voice cut through the air like a blade, and both Claire and Vanessa turned. He stood at the elevator doors, his face ice cold, his dark eyes burning with a rage Claire had never seen before. "Get out of my home. Now." Vanessa did not look afraid. She only smiled, a cruel, malicious curve of her lips. "I was only welcoming my replacement, Luca." She glanced at Claire one last time before stepping back toward the elevator. "Remember what I said, little girl. He will get bored of you." When the elevator doors closed behind Vanessa, Luca crossed the room to Claire and gripped her shoulders. "Do not listen to anything she says," he said, his voice still tight. "Vanessa is toxic and dangerous. She once tried to kill me to take my empire, and that is why I ended the engagement. She is not who you think she is." Claire nodded, but inside her, the seeds of doubt had been planted, and she did not know what they would grow into. A week after the confrontation with Vanessa, Claire was sitting alone in the penthouse reading when her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She hesitated for a second before answering, and that decision changed everything. "Hello, Claire Bennett." The man's voice on the other end was cool and professional. "This is Special Agent Morrison, FBI. I need to speak with you about Luca Moretti." Claire's heart skipped. She glanced around the empty room, as if afraid someone was watching. "I do not know him," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Please do not lie to me, Miss Bennett." Morrison's tone did not shift. "We know you are living in his penthouse. We know you have been there for over a month, and we know who he is. Luca Moretti is a murderer, Miss Bennett. He runs one of the largest criminal organizations in this city. He is responsible for dozens of deaths, millions of dollars in dirty money, and countless other crimes you cannot even imagine. And you are sleeping in his bed." Claire said nothing, but her grip tightened on the phone until her knuckles turned white. "We can help you," Morrison continued, his voice softening, turning persuasive. "We can protect you. A new identity. A new life. Somewhere Moretti will never find you. You will be safe, Miss Bennett. You will be free. All we need is your cooperation, your statement, what you know about his operations. That is all." Silence stretched for a few seconds. Claire could hear Morrison's breathing on the other end, patient, waiting for her answer. And in that moment, she thought of everything she knew. She knew Luca was a killer. She knew he ran a criminal empire. She knew he had done terrible things to reach where he was now. But she also knew other things. She knew the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. She knew the way he held her when nightmares from her past came for her. She knew the way he listened when she spoke. Truly listened, as if every word mattered. She knew that for the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere. "I have nothing to say to you," Claire said, her voice harder than she ever thought it could be. "And do not call me again." She hung up before Morrison could say another word. That night, when Luca came home, Claire told him everything. She did not hide a single detail. She told him about the call, about the FBI's offer, about the new identity and new life they promised. Luca's face darkened as he listened, his jaw tightening with controlled anger. But that anger was not aimed at her. It was aimed at the people trying to pull her away from him. "They are desperate," he said, his voice ice cold. "They cannot touch me directly, so they are trying to use you." Then he stopped, his dark brown eyes searching hers. "Why did you not accept? You could have escaped all of this, escaped my world, escaped me. Why did you not do it?" Claire stepped closer, placed her hand against his chest, right over the steady beat of his heart. "Because you are mine too," she said, her voice firm and certain. "And I do not abandon what belongs to me." Luca's eyes widened, and something shifted in his gaze. Something broke open, like a final wall collapsing. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with a tenderness that was completely at odds with the danger in him. "I love you, Claire." He whispered it, his voice rough with emotion. "I tried not to. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it would make you a target. But I could not stop it. I love you." And Claire, the orphan who had lived her whole life without anyone loving her, finally heard the words she had been starving for 27 years. "I love you too," she whispered back. And she knew, no matter how insane it was true. 3 months passed, and Claire learned how to live in Luca Moretti's world. She learned to ignore the midnight phone calls, the secret meetings she was not allowed to attend, the bloodstains that sometimes appeared on his shirts, stains he tried to hide before she could see them. She learned to accept that the man she loved lived in the dark, and that she had chosen to stand beside him in that darkness. But that night, as Luca prepared for a meeting he called the most important of his career, Claire felt a fear she could not explain. It started as a sick feeling in her stomach, then spread through her body like a cold wave. A warning, her mother used to say. The women in their family had strong intuition, and Claire had learned to trust her instincts after years of surviving on the streets. "Do not go," she spoke as Luca tightened his tie in front of the mirror, her voice trembling. "Please, do not go tonight." Luca turned to her, and his dark brown eyes softened when he saw the worry on her face. He stepped closer, took her hand, and kissed her forehead. "This meeting could end the war between the families," he said gently. "If it works, there will be no more bloodshed. I have to go, Claire, but something is wrong." Claire gripped his hand, her gray blue eyes wide with fear. "I feel it. I cannot explain it, but I feel it. Please, just tonight, do not go." Luca looked at her for a long moment, and Claire saw the struggle in his gaze. But in the end, he shook his head. He could not postpone it. He had promised the others, and in this world, a promise was everything. "I will be home before midnight, I promise." He kissed her again, deeper, longer, as if he felt something too but refused to admit it. Then he left, and Claire stood there watching the elevator doors close behind him with a heavy heart. 2 hours later, her phone rang. Marco. Claire answered with shaking hands, and the voice on the other end confirmed every fear she had tried to push away. It is an ambush. Marco's voice was tight but controlled. The boss is hurt. We are bringing him back. Call the doctor. The line went dead, and Claire stood frozen for a second, the world spinning around her. Then the survival instinct she had sharpened for 27 years took over. She ran to the phone and called the private doctor Luca had given her for emergencies. She prepared the bedroom, brought clean towels and warm water, did everything she could think of. When the elevator doors opened, and Marco and 2 other men carried Luca inside, Claire's heart splintered. He was frighteningly pale, his white shirt now dark red at the left shoulder. Blood. Too much blood. She rushed to him as they laid him on the bed, her hands closing around his and refusing to let go. I am fine, Luca murmured, his voice weak but still trying to steady her. It is only the shoulder. I will be fine, Claire. But she did not hear him. She only stared at his face, at the dark brown eyes fighting to stay open under heavy lids, and she gripped his hand harder, as if sheer will could keep him with her. The doctor arrived 15 minutes later, and what followed was a blurred nightmare. Claire sat beside the bed and held Luca's hand as the doctor removed the bullet from his shoulder and stitched the wound. She did not cry. She did not speak. She only sat there, holding on until her fingers went numb, until the doctor finally said Luca would be fine, that the bullet had missed anything vital, that he only needed rest. And when everyone was gone, when the room held only the 2 of them, Luca pulled her down onto the bed beside him, his uninjured arm wrapping around her. Vanessa, he whispered, his voice ice cold even as his body lay weak. She arranged all of it, and she just signed her own death notice. 2 days after the ambush, Claire sat beside Luca's bed while the morning news played on the television. She barely registered the anchor's voice until a familiar name cut through the steady rhythm. Vanessa Romano. Claire lifted her head, her heart beating faster as the woman's face appeared on the screen. Vanessa Romano, 33 years old, was found dead in her apartment early this morning, the anchor said in a level, professional tone. Police say it is a suicide. There are no signs of forced entry or outside violence. The victim's family declined to comment. Claire looked at Luca. He lay on the bed, his shoulder wrapped in bandages, his face still pale from blood loss, but his dark brown eyes were fully awake when they met hers. There was no surprise in them, no question, only a cold satisfaction he did not bother to hide. Claire knew the truth. She did not need to ask. She did not need confirmation. Vanessa had not taken her own life. Vanessa had been killed because she dared to touch Luca Moretti, and even lying injured in bed, he still had the power to order someone's death from far away. Claire rose and walked to the window, staring out at the city waking below. Morning sunlight spilled over the high rises, turning them into shining pillars of gold. The world outside kept moving as if nothing had happened, unaware that a woman had just died for betraying the man Claire loved. She has changed. The thought came to her as clearly as daylight. She was not the exhausted waitress in the late-night diner anymore. She had become part of this world, Luca's world, a world of blood and violence and deaths disguised as accidents. She was in love with a killer, and she did not regret it. Claire thought of the 11-year-old girl who found her mother motionless on the floor. She thought of the 18-year-old girl curled in the corner of a subway station in winter. She thought of 27 years of fighting alone, with no one on her side, no one protecting her. And now she had Luca, a man willing to kill anyone who threatened her, a man who looked at her as if she were his entire world, a man who had given her what she had been starving for all her life, a place to belong, a person she could call home. She turned back to Luca. He was still watching her, his gaze sharp even as his body remained weak. He was waiting for her reaction, waiting to see if she would run, waiting to see if the news about Vanessa would be the final breaking point. Claire walked back to the bed and sat beside him. She took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin against hers. I know what you did, she said, her voice gentle but steady. I know Vanessa did not kill herself. Luca did not deny it. He only watched her, waiting. And I am not afraid, Claire continued, her gray-blue eyes locked on his dark brown ones. I am not afraid of what you are. I am not afraid of your world, or the darkness in you, or the things you have to do to survive. I am afraid of only one thing. She paused, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. I am afraid of losing you. The night you were hurt, when Marco called and said there was an ambush, I thought I was going to lose you. And in that moment, I realized I would do anything, accept anything, just to keep you here with me." Luca pulled her down, his uninjured arm wrapping around her, drawing her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat under her ear, steady and real, proof that he was still alive, still here with her. "You are mine," he whispered into her hair, "and I will never let anyone take you from me. Never." They lay there in silence, two dark souls curled together in the morning light, and Claire knew she had crossed a line she could never step back over. 1 year after that fateful night in the diner, Luca took Claire up to the penthouse rooftop. He had been secretly preparing everything all week, and when the door opened, Claire caught her breath at the scene in front of her. Hundreds of small candles lined the railing, their flickering light blending with the city glow below. Millions of lights glittered like stars fallen to earth, forming a golden carpet that stretched all the way to the horizon. A gentle night wind brushed through Claire's hair as she stepped outside, and she felt Luca's hand tighten around hers, warm and steady as always. He guided her to the center of the rooftop, where a small table had been set with red roses and champagne. But Luca did not stop there. He turned to her, those dark brown eyes deep and reflecting the candlelight, and slowly dropped to one knee. Claire's heart skipped. He pulled a small black velvet box from inside his suit jacket and opened it. Inside was a diamond ring, not too large, not too flashy, but perfect. The light in the stone caught the candle flames and scattered tiny rainbow flashes, as if the gem itself were breathing. "A year ago," Luca began, his voice low and trembling slightly with emotion, "you stepped into my life with a note on a napkin and saved my life without asking for anything in return. You gave me something I never believed I deserved to receive. Love, acceptance, a reason to become a better man." He paused and swallowed. "Claire, you are the light in the darkness of my life. You are my home. You are everything." He held the ring up, never taking his eyes off her face. "Marry me. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, loving you, and making you happy." Claire did not hesitate. No thinking, no weighing. She had known the answer for a long time, maybe since the moment she decided to write that note in the grease-scented kitchen of the late-night diner. "Yes," she whispered it, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yes, I will marry you." Luca stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made only for her. Then he kissed her, beneath millions of city lights and hundreds of flickering candles, and Claire knew she had found where she belonged. She remembered that night in the diner, the 27-year-old girl with worn-out shoes and $17 in tips. She had been exhausted, invisible, surviving day by day without truly living. Then a dangerous man walked into her life, and everything changed. She walked into that diner exhausted and unseen, only trying to survive one more shift. She walked out after saving a man's life, and losing her heart in the process. Sometimes she wondered what her life would have been if she had not passed him that note, if she had chosen to protect herself instead of choosing him. But then she looked into those dark brown eyes, the eyes that saw her as if she were the only light in his dark world, and she knew she would not change a single thing, not one thing at all. Claire and Luca's story teaches us that love can come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes people need the courage to take happiness, even when it comes in an imperfect form. Kindness, sincerity, and courage always have value, no matter how harsh the world may be, and most importantly, everyone deserves to be loved and to be seen. If you feel this story touched your heart, please press the subscribe button so you do not miss the next moving stories. Please hit like and share this video with the people you love to spread meaningful stories. We would truly love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this story? Have you ever met someone who changed your life? Share in the comments below. We always cherish every line of feeling from your hearts. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. We wish everyone watching good health, a joyful life, and peace every day. Goodbye, and see you again in the next video.